Hey guys, Comic Boom here to review the movie Wonder Woman. This was a great movie. I finally got around. I wanted to say a few words about the movie because so many people have gone to see it. It's really cleaning up at the box office. There's a reason for it. This movie is really, really good. And just like so many of us young guys remember the Superman the movie when it first came out way back when we were youngsters, and we remember that quite fondly. It's quite easy to imagine a lot of young people getting their first taste of a superhero woman on the screen in such a spectacular fashion. Those of you who might not have liked BVS will nonetheless remember that during BVS, Bruce Wayne discovers a picture with Wonder Woman on it, along with Steve Trevor and some of his soldiers, and that photo was taken in World War I. And in this movie, that picture is fully explained, because that picture that was shown in Batman v Superman created a lot of questions, not only for the characters in BVS, particularly Bruce Wayne, who's curious to know Wonder Woman's origins, but also us fans. And that's exactly what this movie does. And this movie starts off basically with Wonder Woman receiving the original picture that Bruce Wayne finds and gives it to Diana as a gift. And on the back of the picture, he says something to the effect of, "Someday I'd sure like to hear your story." And the movie then proceeds and it tells Wonder Woman's origins. The movie has just the right message that you need to hear. This really is a message of love. It reminds me quite a bit of the central message of Greg Rucka's run. Those of you who aren't collecting Wonder Woman, reading Wonder Woman Rebirth, written by Greg Rucka, particularly issue 23, that message was all about a message of love. Wonder Woman defeats Ares, the god of war, or at least defeats the twin sons of Ares, Phobos and Deimos. In the comic book, she defeats them literally through her love and her acceptance of them and forgiveness of their atrocities and her love for humanity. It's really quite extraordinary, and it really sets Wonder Woman apart from other heroes. And this movie in many ways is no different. But what makes this movie far better than Rebirth Wonder Woman is that there's actually action in it. And Wonder Woman is kick-ass. I mean, the scenes in here are amazing. This movie takes place in World War I. Now, it's an interesting choice. The fact that it took place in World War I is very interesting, but it's also, it fits perfectly thematically within the message that the movie is trying to get across. World War I was known as, in many circles, as the Great War, the war to end all wars. It was also known as the Chemists' War, because it was the first time that they used gas, like mustard gas, chlorine gas, in order to attack enemies, and it was the beginning of trench warfare. World War I was horrendous in the casualties. No other war in history up until that time had resulted in so many casualties. There was 9 million combatants died, in addition to 7 million civilians. So there was a horrendous amount of death. And to have a Wonder Woman movie there, what's spectacular about the achievement of Wonder Woman is that she manages to enter World War I. She comes to man's world after Steve Trevor washes up on the shores, and we have some World War I Germans show up on the Paradise Island as well, looking for Steve Trevor to take him out, to kill him. And ultimately, they didn't know the Amazons were there. They stumbled upon Themyscira. And of course, once Themyscira is revealed, that's a sign to Wonder Woman and the Amazons that the Ares has more of a foothold in man's world than ever before. And that was one of their fears, because back in the day, Zeus had defeated Ares, and Zeus had also created a god killer who everybody believes is actually a sword, and he who wields the god killer sword can kill a god. And so ultimately Wonder Woman ends up taking the god killer into man's world, follows Steve Trevor back to man's world to defeat Ares. And Wonder Woman, in her wonderful sense of naivete, truly believes that the only reason that men are evil is because of Ares. That Ares is poisoning the minds of men, and that's what's causing all the conflict in the world is a god, Ares, and it's all Ares' fault. And what's so what's so gut-wrenching about the movie and almost refreshing in its cheesiness in some parts is Wonder Woman truly believes that if she kills Ares, all evil will leave mankind. And of course, we the viewer know that isn't the case, but there's something about the way Diana is and the way Gadot plays that character that really sort of makes you cheer for her and almost wish that to be the case. And when the first epic battle scene from Wonder Woman takes place in no man's land, and in World War I they have trench warfare. So between the two trenches, if we have the Allies and the German forces, they would have trenches on either side. In fact, all of World War I, there was a total of 12,000 miles of trenches were built, constructed during World War I. And usually the movement of forces back and forth was sometimes only in meters. And they would have, behind the trenches, they would have artillery, and artillery would be firing upon either side. And it was very hard to get a movement forwards. It was very hard for either side to make any headway. And that's why World War I was a war of attrition. They literally grinded each other down. And most men who were killed, and most civilians who were killed, were in fact killed by artillery. Just the artillery that was fired behind the trenches. And to a lesser extent, of course, there was many millions killed also in no man's land, because that area between the trenches, well, that was no man's land. And what better symbol to overcome no man's land than a Wonder Woman? And that is that scene where Wonder Woman refuses to leave the scene of the battle, refuses to watch people suffer, and insisting on putting an end to this particular trench warfare in a particular area on the Western Front. That scene where she steps up into no man's land and takes the bullet, takes the artillery fire, and defensively, through defense, creates a distraction that allows Steve Trevor and the Allies to overcome the Germans in that offensive. It's an extraordinary scene, and it really gives you a sense of hope and heightens the drama in the movie. And it's really extraordinarily well filmed and done. And when they come in after they defeated the Germans with that in trench warfare, and then overtaking the town and winning the town back from the Germans, it's really an extraordinary scene. The villain in the movie is played by Danny Houston. He is General Ludendorff. And through most of the movie, Wonder Woman believes that he is Ares. And when she ultimately confronts him and ultimately defeats him, she believes that, well, Ares is gone. Why aren't all the men? Why haven't they stopped fighting? Because I've killed Ares. They should have stopped fighting, but they didn't. She realizes the truth of what Ares told, of what General Ludendorff had basically alluded to her, and what Ares later confirms to her. The true Ares, who is actually Sir Patrick Morgan, played by David Thewlis, who's actually one of the good guys in the movie, who is revealed to be Ares later on. And Ares says to her that, look, I'm just a vessel. That it's mankind's own inherent proclivity toward evil, toward conflict, that creates war. I just get my power from it. But you can destroy me, you can do whatever you want to me, but mankind's always going to be inclined to have, it's in man's nature to destroy itself. And in that sense, it's kind of depressing. But Wonder Woman does defeat Ares. And of course, there's that epic phrase she says that, I am Diana of Themyscira, daughter of Hippolyta. In the name of all that is good, your wrath upon this world is over. And then she defeats Ares. But the reality is that she defeats Ares' wrath upon the world. But we know from history, that, of course, evil never leaves Earth, because we're still left with it. Because defeating Ares is merely a god. That's all he is. And he might feed off war, but mankind, or humanity, is what, in fact, creates it in the first place. Remember what Wonder Woman said to Bruce Wayne at the end of Batman v Superman. She said to him, and I'm paraphrasing, that 100 years ago, she left mankind because of man's proclivity toward war and conflict. And you can really get a sense of as to why that's the case if you know your history. The movie Wonder Woman ends on a high note. She defeats Ares, and she's looking fondly at the picture, and she's sad, but she has a smile on her face because it brings back some fond memories. But it must have also brought back other memories that weren't shown in the movie, and that is what happened after World War One. The fact of the matter is that World War One destroyed at least 4 empires: the German Empire, Russian Empire, the Austro-Hungary Empire, and the Ottoman Empire. All ceased to exist at the end of World War One. There was the Treaty of Versailles, November of 1919, that negotiated the so-called Paris Peace Treaty, that ended World War One. Created something in Article 231 in the Treaty of Versailles was the War Guilt Clause, that basically essentially forced Germany to accept all the guilt for causing World War One in the first place. Guilt that pissed them off so much that it was one of the primary motivators for Germany. They always resented being blamed for World War One, and that resentment fostered and led to, in large part, what was World War II. It allowed Hitler to work on that resentment, to create a more populist uprising, which was one of the things which underscored a lot of the tensions in Germany, which gave rise to Nazism and ultimately World War II. Essentially, there are many historians that believe World War II is nothing but a glorified extension of World War I that merely took place a generation later. And unfortunately, Wonder Woman, I think, she must have found that out in spades. And so I'm really hoping that the sequel to Wonder Woman will be a World War II epic. It probably won't be, but I would love that to be the case because, quite frankly, Wonder Woman fighting in World War II, fighting Nazis, I think would be pretty cool. But I suppose it's already been done. They don't want to. DC probably doesn't want to duplicate what was done with Captain America. But nonetheless, it is something that I would like to see explored. I think it would be epic. At the end of the day, the Wonder Woman movie had a wonderful message of hope. And it was kick-ass. Gal Gadot did a fantastic job as Wonder Woman. And the fact is that Wonder Woman may have failed to bring peace to man, but in many ways that was the point. Her message was still powerful, that love can conquer all, but it first must be practiced. It must be felt, extended, and it cannot be forced. But if you're open to it and you accept it, you can become extremely powerful. Wonder Woman's own powers herself seemed to become more powerful throughout the movie as her friendships were forged, and as her understanding of humanity increased, so did her power. As she understood the limitations of man, and as she understood the realities of war, it also helped her conquer it through her love, through her compassion. She didn't allow the atrocities of war to destroy her. It actually made her embrace her love and extend it all the more. And that's what makes her so extraordinary. And that's, I think, why many people consider this movie a feel-good movie. Because despite it being a movie that deals with one of the most horrific wars in the history of mankind, it actually seems to be an uplifting movie. That's the extraordinary success. That's what I find incredible about this movie. I would never have thought they'd been able to do that. Director Patty Jenkins could have made this an R-rated movie very, very easily. The horrors in World War I, of which were just barely touched upon in Wonder Woman, were nonetheless very subtly conveyed in various scenes in a way that really makes this movie work, and you still got the sense of the horrors involved. This was a really good movie, very well done, and kudos to Patty Jenkins. And guys, if you haven't seen Wonder Woman, go out and see it. I've seen it once. I'm probably going to go see it again. It's a great movie, and Comic Boom out.